Hi, I'm Mike Maloney, and welcome to another CSRM podcast. Today's episode is hosted by Dr. Greg Linville.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another CSRM podcast as we continue to dive into the book, Putting the Church Back in the Game. I'm joined yet again with Dr. Greg Linville and also Scott Stedman as we are dissecting this book, and we're on into chapter 7. We ended last week kind of talking about the personal responsibility for the sports person to make sure that they are involved in a local congregation, to make sure that they have spiritual discipline as they're involved in serving and worshiping and all that. And Greg, you offered up a lot of challenges for the sports person to really consider when it comes to the local church and really having that intersection between their personal faith and their sports, their rec, and their fitness. And today we kind of leave chapter 6 and we go into chapter 7, and it's about church funding and its relationship to sports, rec, and fitness ministry. And so kind of give us an overview and highlight a couple of things that are very important for the church sports minister to consider when it comes to funding.
Thanks, Dan. And again, it's great to be back with you guys. Scott, we appreciate your excellence and having all the whistles and bells for this go on. And if you're listening to it, I'd encourage you sometime, maybe even just pick up the video, because there's a lot of things that Scott throws on in an editing way that makes it graphically even more relevant and easier to understand. So I just appreciate both of you guys. We're in a section of 4 chapters that are taking on individual subtopics within this overall of putting the church back in the game. And I'm going to be maybe tickling the ears of those people who are on the finance board now and saying, how can we afford to do this, or at least help us figure out how to not lose as much money? I'm going to tell you that I think this is one of the best ways to fund your church, your local congregation of any. And some of it may not be in the short term, but in the long run, it's going to be amazing. What do I mean by that? Short term, if you build a multi-million-dollar facility and you're saying, we're going to reach a lot of people who are far from Jesus in our church, and then they're going to bring them in, and then we're going to count on those people coming in to start to give money and give tithes and sacrificial gifts so to help pay for that building and all that goes on. Well, if you understand what we talked about earlier in weeks past, that it takes a number of years, particularly for the adult, to come to faith in Christ, and then it takes even maybe a couple years beyond that for Christ to grab hold of the purse strings or the pocketbook or the bank account of those people. I hope you have got a way to pay for your facility for the first 5 to 10 years before counting on those people. But long term, you're going to increase the amount of people that are attending your church services, which will mean they'll more likely give in the intermediate term. And then a lot of those people, if you've reached them, and them, not only them, but their kids and grandkids over generations, when it comes to estate planning, you're going to have a lot of revenues coming in. And so you really cannot not afford to do this. The sports ministry is going to bring people to you. Okay, so then let's get into some of the specifics. What do we need to consider, and what is it that we need to do? So one of the most common discussions I have is with people is how do we be self-supporting? How do we do these things in the sports, rec, and fitness, and that It's not going to cost us money. Well, first of all, I'm going to challenge that mindset. Most congregations send thousands, if not millions of dollars overseas for mission. They never expect people that are being served by those missions to give money, at least initially. This is just what they do. This is a local mission. What you do in your sports rec and fitness is local mission. And so therefore, why should we expect those people who we're trying to reach for Jesus to pay totally for it? I think that this is one of the misperceptions. So in one perspective about how we fund it is it's all on the backs of people who are playing in the leagues or coming into the rec center, what have you. I just said why I think that's probably not the best way to go. I'm going to give one sub point there. If the people who are paying their fees to participate in the sports rec and fitness of your local congregation, if they feel like their money is going to put the new roof on your church building or whatever, going into the pastor's retirement fund, they're going to be a little less open to participating and probably a lot less open to hearing the gospel. So I challenge this way of thinking. The second perspective, then, you can run to a conclusion that I'm not saying is correct, is that the church should pay, the local congregation should pay 100% and everybody should just participate for free. Well, what we know through the YMCA historically that studied this and others is that people who pay nothing typically don't participate a lot. They don't, if it's worth nothing, they think it's probably worth nothing. And so they don't come. And so there is a way in which if we charge them relevant fees to get into these and participate into these, they will more likely come back. A guy who said, I paid my $50 or $70 to play in some league, I'm going to go every week. The gal who has, paid the $100 per month to attend the fitness class, they're going to go regularly, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. But what we really recommend, and Dan and Scott, I'd like your perspectives on this in the churches that you've been involved with, is that we recommend a synthesis of this, that we do fund this through our mission budget in our church. We fund it in such a way that we pay for all of the permanent of what it is. Permanent means the building. It means the permanent full-time staff. It means the permanent long-lasting equipment. That way you can literally say to the people coming into your leagues, you're only paying for the balls and the nets and the referees and maybe a uniform or something. You're not paying for our church budget. But then those people that are paying for that, they feel like they should come still, but they really appreciate the short-term things that they'll cover, but not the long-term. Dan, Scott, your thoughts?
I think that's a really good model. When I think back to when I was a sports minister at a local church, knowing that the permanent structures were paid for, and knowing that I was on the church payroll, it gave me a lot of freedom. It gave me a lot of freedom to keep costs low, but also recognizing that people will pay league fees for certain things. They're kind of used to it. And then that also allowed us to be competitive with maybe community rec leagues, things like that. So we could even have the cost a little bit lower to truly try to reach some people and bring on short-term help paying for referees, which we always try to really encourage that. If you have that capability to have referees, especially for your youth leagues, it just really helps. So I think that's a great model. A lot of times I think sports ministers get into that struggle when you're recognizing, well, I feel the pressure to put on a lot of good camps and leagues so that I can raise my own salary, so I can stay employed with the church. It just takes our focus off of what truly matters, and that's being with people and everything else. So I think the idea for a church to consider this a mission, especially for those more permanent things, it benefits not only the church, but the sports minister. It frees him or her up to actually focus on what matters most. So I think this is a great model. I benefited from it. And I feel for those that don't have a model like this, but just because of that pressure to try to raise a bunch of money.
And
I would kind of say that, oh, I'm sorry, Greg. I know. I was just kind of say, I've never, in my experience, like we don't really have like sports ministers or anything that does all this. So a lot of times, if there's any type of sports league or anything, we're usually using a different program, and usually everything's just volunteers. And so it's kind of so that there hasn't been like a really good model that I have seen where it's like, oh, that makes sense, like this would actually work. So all this stuff is kind of brand new to me, so I'm excited to hear it.
So there's a couple of things I've mentioned just to highlight them again. The perception of your funding is really important, and so it's got to be very clear what the participants are paying for and what they're not paying for. And I think it's okay for you and that's out there at First Church, you put it in your publication. Your fees will never go to pay for the new roof on our athletic facility or church facility. It goes to pay for this, that, and the other thing. And then there's an accountability that it's, I think, very important to be very forthright with all of these people that are participating and show your church budget. Show them your sports ministry budget and how much was taken in and how much went out and all of these things. If they recognize how much the trophies cost, how much the referees cost, how much the balls cost, etc., and you're at a break-even level, they're going to say that's pretty well done. So I think the perception and accountability are all parts of it. There's another thing that we have to consider, and that is, how do we sustain the budget and the finances? Particularly there's a lot of churches in the last 2 decades who they've built these new facilities. I know, Dan, you were part of probably $1 million or more facility at one of the churches that you were a senior pastor of. They don't stay new. Newsflash, these facilities don't stay new. They age and they need to be repaired. They need to be upgraded. There's a lot of things that need to happen. And so you need to have a long-term budget as well as your short-term. You can't just have a budget that says these participant fees are going to pay for referees and the balls. But maybe some feel more comfortable with this than others. Maybe it does help refinish the floor every couple years. Maybe it does go to replace hoops every 20 years. You have to figure that in, and you have to help people, help your people that are on the finance boards. And I'm talking now to the sports minister who is reading this book. You've got to help your finance people know that you're being accountable. They're going to love this, that you've got these kinds of things. Because what I've seen far too often is the facility goes downhill and the quality goes down, and it's where we lose the chance to reach people. Dan or Scott, thoughts?
Greg, you're spot on. One of the things we did at the church that you are referencing, that I was the lead pastor at, is we added on because we had to for space. But a big part of our strategy on adding on was because we had so many people coming to our youth basketball leagues, and we wanted to have more space for parents to be able to fellowship, hang out. We had a plan for a great cafe for healthy options and stuff, because we noticed so many people were coming in with fast food bags just because of the pace of life, the busyness, trying to get to the church for practice and games and stuff. And so we wanted another option there. And we wanted the fellowship. We wanted to really connect with people in that way. And also we wanted to improve our safety. Greg, I think you came in and you toured our facility, and you saw, well, our gym was also where we worshiped. And so there's chairs over here, and there's carts over here, and there's a basketball league going on and practice. And so we wanted more space so that there aren't any injuries, and so that we wouldn't get sued, or at least the likelihood would decrease that we would be sued. And so it's all of that strategy. And also recognizing, yes, this thing is very costly. Yes, the church congregation is giving towards that. But also, just like you were sharing, we also want to incorporate our fees can help with the upkeep. And it's not going to pay for the whole thing, obviously, but if we see some money coming in, and if you can go to your finance team and help them to understand, hey, a percentage of these fees could go to upkeep, or to the improvement, or to the patching of the drywall, because that's bound to happen, because you've got basketballs and kids, and sometimes angry people after a foul wasn't called may punch a wall or something like that. But if you set aside money through your fees, and Greg, just like you were, breaking down for us, if people see where their money is going, they have no problem paying for that. People know things are very expensive, especially building project, especially upkeep, cleaning, things like that. And so I think the more honest we can be in our overall strategy, it just helps us to set money to the side for that. So I've benefited from that. It makes finance people very happy when you are thinking all those things through.
Well, and to your point there, or to one thing you said there, and we don't have the time to go into it right now, but I'll just call it out. We never recommend drywall anywhere in an athletic facility. You spend a little more on the brick or the cinder block, but you make up for it time after time after time because you're not repairing it. I'll keep going here, that there's something that is a trend right now. Some of it is driven in more recent days by COVID, but that there are less people that are attending a Lord's Day morning service. And so therefore the traditional ways of contributing as the plate is passed down the pews, some of that is going by the wayside. And this, again, we can't get into this, but churches have to adapt to this. And you've got to adapt to online giving. Excuse me. Dan, any thoughts about that?
I think that is absolutely a key thing for just a whole lot of reasons. One, online giving is something that it just allows people to set it up and not think about it. So those recurring gifts are happening. So if you are a person on a finance team, if you're a senior pastor, or if you have influence on either one of those two categories, just encourage the online giving. It also helps with league registrations. There's so many different platforms for giving for a church that you can set up for a multitude of ways for people to give in an easy way, money quickly. If we learned anything during COVID, it's that it is essential for churches to have a digital way for people to give, because we weren't meeting all together physically. And so churches who were able to kind of get through that difficult period and continue to were churches who had that opportunity for people to give in a digital way, and even for sports ministers to have a way for people to give to something that was even a digital fitness class or something like that. Giving continued on because of those giving platforms. And if CSRM can help you think through that process, we would be happy to help you find great organizations, great software, great platforms to allow you to give in a digital way. We cannot encourage that enough. It is so pivotal for churches to have that going forward.
And Dan, why don't you mention, we've got some ways that we have a group that can come in and help churches raise additional funds.
Yeah, creative fundraising is something that I think a lot of churches, a lot of parachurch organizations like ours can certainly help with. And so a couple of things that we have, one is called Windfall Fundraising. And what Windfall can do is they can go into churches, if you own a business or no business owners, they can look for ways for you to save money. And so they are the experts in this field. They can look at all your bills, they can look at your payroll, taxes, things like that, and they can find ways for you to save money. This is exactly what they do. And so what they do, if they help a church, for example, to save money, you enter into a 3-year covenant with them, where a third of the savings would go back to the church, a third would go to Windfall, a third would also go to organizations like CSRM, or maybe even back to your church or to your sports ministry, and just allow you to save money in those ways. And over time, it just helps, because oftentimes people who are handling the payment of bills, they're not experts, or they're super busy and they just want it handled. And so they haven't had the time to look into contracts for things like printers or cell phones or things like that, whatever office expenses that you may have, where Windfall can kind of know the secrets. They can find ways to get you out of a contract that's not a good contract in order to save money, and also to bless great organizations like ours, or even your own church. Another one off the top of our head that we've worked with in the past is a great organization called Telos. Telos helps to get those credit card processing fees down to a more manageable cost. For example, the church I'm associated with, that cost can be upwards of 3%. It's just one of those things that just adds up over time. We don't want to necessarily put that on people, and the church doesn't want to handle that. So getting that cost down benefits both. And then with the savings, a percentage would go to a church, to a sports ministry organization like CSRM. And so we have great organizations that we can get you in touch with to help with the digital way of giving, or just the overall concept of looking at your expenses in order to save just a whole lot of money. So yes, we can help you with those things. And those are two clear examples of how we can help you partner.
Appreciate that, Dan. I know we're coming down to the end, and I'll wrap it up with this. Again, if you're following in the book, page 86, there's a scoreboard there, and it talks about 4 main ways that you can enhance your income through the sports, recreation, and fitness outreaches. We've talked about participation fees. Yes, you can do that. And people will pay for that. They expect to pay for it. But also think about sponsorships, going to your local car dealership or your grocery store or your legal firm or doctor's office or anything like that, any business. Would they sponsor a team? They especially like sponsoring youth teams, maybe adult teams, maybe sponsor an entire league, or the field is named after them, or the court is named after them. In the same way that naming rights for a lot of the professional franchises, we've seen churches that there's a field that is named after somebody. And we've even seen some churches that have, I was just at a church last week, and they've created a Jacobs Field, the Cleveland Indians, the big tall wall out there. And this is dimensions for a wiffle ball court or field, and they built it according to that where the Cleveland professional baseball team plays. And then you get somebody that says, yeah, I'd pay for that, have my name on there, out there. Even buildings or equipment. These basketball hoops were donated in memory of such and such a person. There's all kinds of ways that you can raise money And then obviously you can also raise money for mission trips, asking even people who aren't coming to your church, but they are out there and they are participating in the league. But you say, we're going to give money or canned goods to the local food, whatever it is, that's providing food to the local people. Or we're going to take it down to this orphanage in Brazil. There's all kinds of ways that you can get people to give money on mission trips that are sports related. And of course, websites and other social media sponsors that people can sponsor your website. There's just all kinds of ways. Well, I know we're out of time, and here's just some ideas that we've had about how to envision financing these things, how to think, what to think about in some budgets, and also some additional ways to raise some revenues. Back to you, Dan.
Greg, those are great parting thoughts. And I think there's a lot of businesses out there that they're looking to partner in a lot of different ways. There's some creative things there. If it helps them, obviously, they're going to be interested in a partnership like that. And a lot of times, let's be frank, they're looking for those tax credits, some charitable giving. And so if that means hanging a banner up in your gym or out there in an outfield fence, it's definitely well worth it. And you just never know through those partnerships what God's going to do. And so we really hope that through our conversation here, that you will begin to really consider the funding strategy that you have for your sports rec and fitness ministry. And if we can help in any way, don't be afraid to reach out to any of us through our website, csrm.org. We love to coach and consult with churches and sports ministers thinking through these kinds of things. When I was a local church sports minister, and even as a senior pastor, as we've already shared, CSRM helped me greatly way before I came on staff. And so if we can lend any expertise or just creative ideas, more than what we've already shared here, or even more in depth, please reach out to us. And one last thing, as we continue to go through this book, Putting the Church Back in the Game, you can purchase this book through our website at csrm.org. That's all the time we have for today's episode. Please join us next week, and we will see you then. Take care.
The CSRM Podcast is a production of CSRM and their production house, Overwhelming Victory. Dr. Greg Linville is the executive producer, and Scott Stedman is the associate producer and editor. To learn more about CSRM, visit csrm.org. For more information about Overwhelming Victory, visit overwhelmingvictory.org. The CSRM Podcast is the flagship member of the podcast network Overwhelming Victory Radio. For more information on Overwhelming Victory Radio, or to listen to our partner podcasts, visit overwhelmingvictory.org/OV Radio. For CSRM Podcasts, I'm Mike Maloney. Have a blessed day.